Hey, welcome to episode 69 of the PoddyC, where nice. No Max this week. Max is on vacation, but we are here anyways to talk all about the exciting news that I didn't know anything about this until it was announced with that interview video. But they're adding a one button rotation to WoW. What were your initial thoughts when you heard about
that? So I feel like it's multifaceted. There are so many different discussion points here. So the first one has been about the complexity of the game, and I think the second one would probably be about the accessibility and just like a couple other topics that we can go into for this specific one button rotation thing that's going on. So I don't know. I mean, like it felt like whatever, right? I was like, it's not. I mean, who cares? But at the same time, I feel like this is one of those things where Blizzard's probably gonna miss on what it should accomplish, because they've done a lot of things like this in the past where they've tried to come up with something and it just doesn't really hit the mark. Like I have so many questions for this. For example, how much DPS should this be doing? How much better players, or how much better should players be, or like how do you even account for certain rotations? Certain rotations, like there's no shot you're gonna be able to do this, right? Like Arcane Mage, where you have to like react to procs, or tanks and healers. Like how do tanks and healers have a one button rotation?
So it's pretty bad for healers. For healers, it just does damage. Yeah. For tanks, it's also. I mean, this is definitely not great for non-DPS. Yeah, it's really just for DPS specs that I think it's kind of it will be okay for.
Yeah, so I mean, like, if you were to give like a percentage, like a percentile of like what or how good this should perform, what would you say it is?
So it's weird because there are reasons you don't want it to be too high, but then the lower it is, kind of the worse that people using it are going to feel, right?
Yeah, and at that point, it's kind of like, why does this even exist, right?
So it's got a 0.3 second GCD penalty associated with it, which is inherently like an 18-20% nerf. It changes a little bit depending on haste, and depending on whether your spec is a 1.5 second haste scaling GCD, or if you have a 1 second flat GCD, which some specs have one, some specs have the other. But either way, that's a big nerf, right? And that's a number that's been changed as well. Initially, it was only a 0.2 second penalty, but they nerfed it on the version that actually came out in PTR. But when they were first talking about it in that interview with me and Max, they were planning on it being a 0.2 second GCD. So I think they don't want it to be too close, and I think it's good. I don't think you want this to be too good, because you don't want people to ever have it be the right choice to use it if they don't want to, right? And that would be like, that would suck, right? If you're ever in a spot where your raid leader's like, hey, just use the one button rotation so that you can focus on doing mechanics on this fight, I think that would be a very unfortunate thing.
What would you say is the mark, though?
A lot of players.
So, like, what would that be?
Well, so you got to factor in that it's not just the nerf of the penalty, but also just like how much worse it is at doing a rotation than like
that's what I don't really understand. It's like, so if it's supposed to like do the optimal rotation, then it's just gonna be really good, right? It's just gonna be like, say it's gonna be a sim. It's gonna be like a raid bots, and it's just like,
if it did sim DPS, it would still be again like 20% behind because of
right. But that's still insane, is it not? Like it would be 80%. So like pretty much everyone's gonna be playing at an 80% tile, which is
when you think about why somebody 80% or why somebody parse is good, though, a lot of it is like uptime, cooldown usage. Now, uptime is easier to focus on if you don't have to think about your rotation. Sure. Cooldown usage, though, is like these things, it won't pop your CDs for you. So there's a further loss for like players using this, where it's like, okay, a lot of rotations interact with cooldowns in different ways, and like you're going to lose more over that. And also the kinds of players that would turn this on are probably the kinds of players who don't religiously press, every single CD as soon as it comes off CD if they're supposed to. So I think there are a lot of safety nets here where it's like, I don't think it's too likely to actually be dangerously good. There have been some various people simming, because obviously one thing about this is it's going to vary from class to class. And I suspect it's going to vary from patch to patch quite a lot as well, where like if you think about starter builds for talents, some classes they're kind of decent, some they're pretty bad, and often they will go unmaintained from patch to patch when something actually changes with how you should do your talents, right? And I think that's a likely thing that will happen to the one button rotation as well, unless they want to commit a lot of resources to updating it and upkeeping it for all 39 specs in the game and all 88 hero talent, or sorry, 78 hero talent spec combinations that exist, right? Like that, I think it's very likely that it will be very variable depending on your class and spec. Because yeah, like you said, there are some classes that are like highly GCD reactive, and there are some classes where it's like, okay, this is just dropping my dots on the target all the time. But then you think about, playing Fury Warrior or Ret Paladin, something like that. Like those are probably a lot less bad to make whatever mistakes it makes on.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of complaints about how like, oh, this feels like it's botting or it's like it doesn't belong in World of Warcraft, etc. I don't really understand all of those complaints because the game has always been simple in the past.
Hmm.
The problem now is this feels like a band-aid to the bigger problem, which is something we've talked about a lot in previous episodes. We've talked about how the complexity of the game feels a little bit too high at the moment, and instead of Blizzard directly addressing that, they're putting this like band-aid solution to the whole skill gap between the best players and the worst players. That's what it comes off as. So that's something we've talked about a bunch, and I kind of wish they went with that direction instead. Because I'm actually a huge fan of one button gameplay. Like maybe not necessarily one button, but like maybe like two button, three buttons.
Can I
And I
introduce
wish
you to
that
Beast Mastery Hunter?
exactly, yeah. So like BM Hunter, Red Paladin, Unholy
Hmm.
DK, Boomkin, like those are extremely popular specs, and people love playing these specs. I kind of wish they went with that route instead. I wish it would be more similar to kind of like an ARPG because like we do have
Hmm.
this new talent tree. We have so many different options in the tree, but we don't really actually have options. Like we only have like one real good build. It would be really cool if Blizzard just gave us the option to play a build that's like maybe 90% as good as the best possible build, and it's like a pretty simple build. Like if it's just something, say I don't know, you're playing a prop paladin and you want your rotation to be like mostly revolved around just hitting shield righteous and avenger shield. You're like a shield heavy paladin build.
Hmm.
If you just have like some type of like one button build that's like very simple and it's still effective, that'd be kind of cool. Or like maybe like a demon hunter that just like focuses on immolation aura and you're just like feeding souls into immolation aura the entire time. That's your entire gameplay. In fact, I would say like a lot of it is probably passive, right? Because like you just maybe like toggle on immolation aura and you're just kind of just keeping it up and you're not thinking about all these other interactions. So I would have liked that approach personally instead of just like some makeshift button that will just like do your rotation for you because I think that's like much cooler. I think it's like it adds flavor, variety, and it just like gives players the ability to play whatever they want to play.
I, I think that, so I've seen a similar sentiment. And I think there's some validity to just like some specs are pretty like over convoluted feeling. I think there's a lot of specs where if you look at their hero talents as well, it's like this really feels unnecessary. Like we're adding just a bunch of uh stuff that isn't cool but is more, annoying procs or things to think about, right? Like you think
Yep.
about like Outlaw Rogue, adding either of the hero talent trees to Outlaw Rogue feels pretty, bad right now. But I think you and a lot of other players are, I think you guys are kind of understanding whether this is supposed to be a feature that you interact with at all. Like I think the Blizzard designing this doesn't say anything about how they want to make the game more or less complex for players like you, players like me. I think this is designed for players that are not us at all. I think this is like
Yeah, that
they are
don't care
adding this to
about
the
like
game for
actually
people that
getting
are
good.
exactly like
And
something
there's
that
nothing
they
wrong with
don't
that.
care about is improvement, is understanding, how your rotation works, understanding how your spec works. Like they're adding this to the game for those players, also of course for accessibility reasons, right? If you're somebody who it's either can't or won't uh, want to, do all of the pressing 30 buttons that some specs require, this is now an option for you. I very much support that side of it, and the side of like, if you're like a gamer dad and your son plays WoW and you want to come home and do a dungeon with him after you come back from working your job or whatever. I don't know. I'm not very good at conceptualizing this family environment because it's pretty different than my life. But if that's what you're up to, I think having something like this is an option to like, play with your friends, even though you don't really want to play WoW, but you want to play with your friends who want to play WoW, like that is now a much nicer way to make that possible. So I support it from those sides, and I don't think it's Blizzard making a statement that's like, hey, we like the complexity of all of our specs right now, and for people that are annoyed by it, we're adding the one button thing. I think those are like just completely different fields of that's not the thought process at all. Is they're adding the one button thing for people that aren't us, and I personally think I think it's good to add it for the people that aren't us. I also would support like reducing complexity on a lot of specs in the game right now, adding some more ways for people to opt in. Like there's a reason Rep Pally and BM Hunter are so popular. Part of it's that they have a fun fantasy, but also part of it is just that there are a lot of people who do want relatively simple gameplay in the context of WoW, where there's so much else that is also going on. And I think more than like 2 or 3, when you factor in Holy Priest as well, sure, of our 39 specs could be aimed at those players for sure. And I would support that, but I don't see them doing one button rotation as them saying we're not going to do that. We've decided to do this instead. I just see it as like a completely different thing.
Yeah, no, I mean, if that wasn't their intent, then that'd be great. But like Ian definitely addressed the issue of there is a pretty big disparity between people who are like really good at this game now and just your average player.
Right.
And I mean, I share that sentiment too. Like that's why I was saying like I do support the whole one button rotation. I do think it's like not a bad problem in World of Warcraft to have. Because if you look at World of Warcraft in the past, there were never really issues with if someone just wanted to chill and play World of Warcraft. They didn't have to be bothered by having to even like do 70% as good as the class should perform. Because I mean, like, you know, you look at something like, let's use the most extreme example, classic World of Warcraft. These players are straight up like I've seen people who are playing hardcore with like motion tracking. I don't know if you've seen it before. There's that one guy, he streams, he's got like an entire configuration where he's like waving his hand in the air and it'll cast an ability. So like that would be like most extreme example of like where you can introduce something really simple to the game that wouldn't require accessibility features. But at the same time, like, you know, we're not trying to go that far back because, you know, we do want some complexity in our game. We're not trying to play classic World of Warcraft here. So that's why I wish there were options in the build because I see this the most with rogues. With rogues, it feels like a lot of players enjoy the fantasy of being a rogue, but they just don't want to play the class itself because it stinks playing a rogue. And it kind of shows like rogue is the least played class right now.
Yeah, although you talked about like doing 10% less to do like a 2-button build instead of a 5-button rotation or whatever, but like there kind of been stuff like that in the game in the past. Even if you think about like Frost DK when it was obliteration versus breath, and like obliteration was maybe 10 or 15% behind, and like for players like us, that's just way too much to ever use it, right? Like it's those talents just go completely unused except by a small set of pretty casual players that are casual enough to want to do that, but also don't just yoink a build from the internet or whatever, and instead actually make their own build and identify like, oh, this would be the easier way to play.
Yeah, I feel like the bigger problem is it's not socially accepted to play these non-optimal, non-meta builds, because that should be more of a thing. Like that should be more of a thing where it'll be like, hey, there's this really cool build where you just hit obliterate and frost strike, and that's your rotation, and it's like it's super sick. You're able to do damage every 45 seconds. That doesn't really get pushed enough because like for the longest time in World of Warcraft, it's always been you have to play the best build, you have to be playing breath, you have to be playing Venthyr Boomkin or whatever it may be, and it's just like it's not really true.
Yeah, I mean, like back in Classic, the first time there were people doing real bad stuff with their builds because the knowledge wasn't out there, and also the knowledge wasn't out there to like fact check somebody, right? Like you couldn't easily just see like, oh, this person's really playing it real wrong, right? I shouldn't invite them. Like it was the world was like you wanted it to be, where you could kind of be playing a 50% as effective frost mage as you were supposed to and still play the game and get invited to stuff.
You just built whatever was cool like that.
I don't know how in an MMO you could force that. Like there are places where you are forced to play with people doing weird suboptimal stuff, right? It's like LFR and random dungeon finder, but outside of that, there's just anytime the content is remotely hard, like you would have to just restrict the information people have so much, or else why would they choose to play with people that are doing 70% as much damage as they could if you want to do hard content, because the hard content's fun, right? Like, but if the content is 30% harder because people are griefing with their builds and stuff, like there's so much pressure on the meta to exist.
The simplicity has to be worth it. That's how I see it. It's like Red Paladin. A lot of people who are playing with Red Paladins think that class is OP because it performs really well
Right.
in those lower keys. But once you get into the higher keys, then you start seeing the classes that are a little bit more complex, but they do extremely well when you play them at the top, like Mage. Yeah, I mean, I do miss that a lot. Bro, I remember playing a Shield Slam Warrior back in like
Hell yeah.
TBC, maybe.
I mean, I play
was
RPGs
cool as
that
hell.
way. I like always want to play. I pretty rarely play like a S tier meta build in ARPGs. I usually like either doing something weird that I've cooked up, or doing something weird that somebody else has cooked up, or taking some newly patched B tier skill and seeing if it's good. But like that, it's just so hard to do that in an MMO. And like design, if Blizzard spent a bunch of time designing cool 90% as effective prop paladin rotations where you could opt into them, I feel like if they did that, nobody would use them, or such a small fraction of the player base would use them. There would be like, I don't know, that would just, it would have to be, it would be for a different game than what WoW is right now.
Yeah.
The other side of this as well is that, so in addition to a single button assistant, whatever rotation thingy, they're also adding in a version of Hikili as well, which it uses like the same logic to figure out what button you should press next, but it doesn't press it for you. It just highlights it on your action bar. So it's basically the add-on Hikili, except instead of player written APLs, it's Blizzard inventing it.
Yeah, that one's nice. I'm always for Blizzard trying to incorporate add-ons into the base game. And they're adding like details too, right? And it's like, what else did he say?
Yeah, that one's like longer term plan, but their basic idea is like any functionality that everybody feels like they need to get from an add-on, we want to make that accessible without having to go download an add-on, which makes perfect sense to me. If you ever like try to get somebody into WoW, it's often one of the things that turns certain people off is it's not the fact that you can customize your UI, it's the fact that like you have to download all these add-ons to have this functionality that everybody kind of agrees is important for the game. So making that available by default is really nice. Blizzard also want to take away some add-on functionality as well, which is, I think, a more worrying thing. That
I haven't seen that part yet. So what did they say?
So the basic idea is like they want to make it so that weak auras and stuff aren't doing fights or mechanics for you. So the goal is to get to a point where they can take away add-ons ability to like read the combat log in dungeons and raids and stuff. And
wait, but that's good. I don't see that as worrying. I am a fan of that personally.
It's a good goal. It's the same goal that Private Auras had. But you'll remember that when Private Auras existed, they made mechanics that were much worse than before Private Auras existed. Or like the mechanics that were made Private Auras in Amir Drasil were worse for being Private Auras. So it's one of these things where it's like, it's a good long-term goal, but there is a lot of risk that in the medium term, if they pulled the trigger on doing that change too soon, they could make the game a lot worse in the meantime than if we, a mechanic that needs a weak aura to solve sucks, but it's much better that you have a weak aura when that mechanic exists than if you don't. And similarly, like the way that the game works with all the information that is given through add-ons that are reading the combat log, like I agree, there's a better version of the game that doesn't have that, but there's a big worry in my mind that the same thing will happen as with Private Auras, where it's like short term, it gets a lot worse. So that to me is the fear, and I think that's the fear that a lot of people have, this fear that like we're just going to end up eventually playing a game where it's worse, but you don't have to download add-ons for it, and that would be a win for some people and a lose for people that are just pretty happy with the game as is.
Yeah, that's how it always feels. That's kind of what I was saying initially about the one button rotation thing. It feels like anytime Blizzard tries to incorporate these new features that should generally be good for the game, just don't end up working out. Like it feels half-assed, or it feels like there's always some other problems that come along the way. Kind of like with the whole cooldown manager thing. Like I don't know if people are actually using the cooldown manager now, but apparently it was causing a lot of issues at the beginning of the patch, right? And
yeah, and it was like it's like pretty not customized. It is customizable, but it's like a pain in the ass to customize it if you want anything other than the order of cooldowns that they have as like the default. You have to do so much work. You can't just like easily drag. If you just want one spell to the left of the others, it's like you have to do a bunch of work to make that happen. So yeah, that is something where I think it's a well grounded worry, but Blizzard's aware of it, so hopefully they, don't run it down that path this time around with all these changes. And I think the big exciting thing is like hopefully we do get to a world where we can make boss fights mechanics that you execute with your brain and are tuned
great.
that way instead, and are like reasonable to do that way. Because you think about a mechanic like Mugsy cages, the mechanic on Mugsy where 4 people get cages and you need to like have backups going to certain locations. Like you could just try and assign 3 people to each location, right? But then what if 2 of them get a cage or what if one of them gets a cage and they were assigned to a different location, right? And like there's no way you have enough time to solve that in your head on the fly, right? And if you try and react to it, it's way less efficient than if you solve it with a weak aura, right? So making mechanics like I think Mugsy cages, for example, in a world where you couldn't have a weak aura to assign that, those mechanics would have to look fundamentally different. And so they need to make sure that they don't just do what they did with private auras, what they did on like Fyrakk Intermission, which is you make a mechanic that is unreasonable outside of weak auras, and then force us to play it anyways, and like that was awful.
Yeah, I wouldn't even say difference. It would just have to have a much more leeway.
Yeah, you could maybe do the same mechanic, but with like a doubled timer before the cage
like
lands,
you just have more time
like
to solve
that.
it before like you actually have to. You can't
Yeah.
just like do it on the fly.
Although even then, there's a big worry in my mind that the value of like a 21st player raid leading goes way up if you have, because like a 21st player could identify, analyze, and like learn how to call that and do it really quickly in that spot. But that's a small worry.
Yeah, it's a small worry. That's like something that only a couple of guilds in the world would have to worry about.
Yeah, it's like obviously like the very top guilds are gonna have a 21st anyways, and it's just like if you're in a guild that's world 20 through 100 or whatever that maybe does or maybe doesn't have a 21st, like maybe now you're thinking way more about doing it. But again,
yeah, I mean,
it all depends on how exactly they implement this. This isn't a short-term plan of theirs. This is like a long-term add-on philosophy thing.
Yeah, I'm actually really glad they mentioned all that, because it is a big problem with World of Warcraft that I've had for the longest time. And if they're able to make this work, well, first of all, we would have to simplify the hell out of the game, because not just encounters, but also the way a lot of classes work. Because a lot of classes, they depend heavily on weak auras to actually play at the highest level. Like you have to be able to track all these different procs and know exactly when to be using certain things. I would say this about Aldraki, Reaver, Vengeance right now. Like Vengeance CH just has so many moving puzzles, and you just have to be on top of all this in order to play the class efficiently. And in order to do that, you need weak auras. I've been like creating so many weak auras for my class, and like during MDI practice too, whenever I run to an issue, I'm just like, all right, what's the first solution? Well, I mean, just make a weak aura for it. So if they can somehow remove that whole aspect of getting good at the game, I think that would be a huge W.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they want to go after like displaying of your own information through weak auras and stuff. I think it's more like enemy interactions with weak auras that they are aiming at. But another one of the worries with this is that with the way that add-ons work right now, it's very hard to shoot that and not hit a bunch of other stuff in the way. So yeah, I mean, I think how our information gets displayed, whether or not they targeted, combat weak auras that show you your rotation, your cooldowns, and all that stuff, and your procs. One big deficiency in the game is that it is quite bad at showing you important information about how your spec's working. Something like Aldrachi Vengeance, yeah, like showing you your progress towards that, and then like which part of the combo you're in, and all those things. If you want to do that with default UI, it is very bad, and it looks bad, and it doesn't give you anywhere near as much information as you could show with weak auras. And if they could fix that with even just the cooldown manager, improving that further and making it so that you could actually like have a similar functionality and show those buffs, show certain buffs in certain spots, and those kind of things, even that would go a long way for me as well. Then to like if it was just part of the default UI as well as an option, and you could just share an import code instead of an add-on to get give people access to whatever cool way you've come up with to show your various, Aldrachi bars or whatever. Yeah, or just make
Yeah,
if it meant that they had to make the spec simpler as well, that would definitely be another option. Although I'm somebody who likes I like the way that a lot of specs work. Some of them I feel like there's some clunkiness, but in general I enjoy like the skill expression of doing a rotation well on a lot of these classes, and I think that's one of the things that a lot of people who agree with me on that knee jerk don't like the idea of a rotation helper or a one button thing. And my advice is like,
yep,
yeah,
I've been hearing that opinion a lot from
don't use
that
it.
crowd of
Like,
players.
I think it's great they're adding these things to the game, but I will not be using them except for maybe making content or whatever. Have everybody in the raid use one button for content, something like that, sure. But besides that, like, I'm not going to be using this. And my advice to players that are learning the game is don't use the one button thing at all. And if you are using the single button rotation or the assistant thing, the highlighter, the Hikili replacement, my advice is the same as it was for Healy, which is probably don't use this at all. And if you are using it, try and get off of it as soon as possible. Like, it's building bad habits. It's not the best way to learn how to play your class. It's like learning to bowl with the guardrails up. Like, you are going to be griefing yourself long term if you try and rely on that, and you actually do want to hit your ceiling at all. So those two things are both true, right? Like, I think that's good they're adding this feature to the game for the people that want it, but it doesn't mean you have to use it. And I don't think players like me or you should use this at all. And they're tuning it pretty much however they tune it. Like, it's going to be worse at doing your rotation than you are if you're good. And probably then if you're a good player, you can probably get better than this rotation assistant in like 2 hours of practice, something like that, tops.
Yep, agreed.
All right. Let's see. Any more stuff on add-ons, the one button thing, the assistant? Nope. On we go. Let's talk about
Right.
the class tuning. Actually, no, let's talk about Dinars. Because last episode we crusaded on behalf of the player base for better Dinars. And Blizzard has given a little bit there, although I think I'm less excited with the change they made than a lot of people are. So the change they made is now you can get myth track items, but it's just the dungeon items, and you have to do all 12s to do it. I'm fine with all 12s being the threshold for this, but like, my problem is just that the dungeon trinkets are so much worse than the raid trinkets for a lot of specs that it's like,
not just that. I mean, it's only trinkets, right? That's being added.
Yeah, you can't get weapons and stuff from it still, which that's not a big deal to me, because like, crafting a weapon with Ascendance is as good as getting a full myth track weapon, pretty much. So it's like not that different.
I mean, but there's some really good stuff. There's like best in slots. There's the
Right.
Neuro Synapse, whatever the hell.
The Jasty D.
Yeah. There's a lot of items that aren't just trinkets that
True.
are kind of excluded from this. Yeah, I mean, like, this whole situation feels like we've lost the war, but at least we won the battle. So I'm still glad they did something about it instead of just like, all right, M plusers, you guys can get fucked. Like, at least we're getting something out of this. But it does feel like they are not willing to give in. Like, they do not want players to be getting mythic rating items, and you have to be doing mythic raid in order to get these mythic raid items. Which, I mean, like, I understand that sentiment, but again, like, all the points still stand from last week. Like, it's just too much to mythic raid. Mythic raid has way too many accessibility issues. Some people just don't want to do it, and they still do high M plus. But at least we're getting something out of this. And
Yeah,
they did buff some of the trinkets, though, which feels like they kind of listened. I
that's
feel like
nice.
they were like,
Yeah.
all right, like, maybe like some of these trinkets aren't as good, so they buffed stuff like the carved candle wax and
The Scarden core, which that thing was
yeah.
so bad. Dude, I did one key with that thing on my mage because I got it like fairly early on in my mage's power progression. And oh my god, it was so brutal to use, but they made it a lot less awful. Still not good. The thing is, like, I'm looking at my mage and I'm pretty sure Heroic House of Cards still beats all this stuff, even on the myth track, by like a not insignificant margin. I don't know how many specs that's true for, but I think there's going to be a lot of specs that will probably still Dinar hero track raid stuff over myth track.
Yeah, that's the thing too. Like,
stuff.
it competes with your raid Dinar, right? So it's like,
right.
Do you even
and
want
you only
to
have
buy
3
this?
total purchases. So the big problem as well, a big problem for me is If you are somebody who's still progressing the raid midway through this season, which like there are a lot of people out there. There are way more people that get cutting edge late than get cutting edge early. If you're one of those people, if you want like a Eye of Kazan because you're doing Gallywix prog, and so you buy a hero track Eye of Kazan because like it's the best upgrade for you by far on a 9-minute fight. That's like the best thing you can do for your raid progression. That's what my guild would require people to do if we were still progging at this time. And then like, okay, one of your 3 dinars has now been spent on a stupid hero track thing, and even when you can replace it later, that's one of your 3 purchases. Like that feels really bad. So I would feel a lot better about it as well if there was just like if you could earn the right to upgrade it back to myth track later down. It like even if you had to still kill those bosses, it would be a lot better feeling. Even if you probably weren't going to kill One Arm Bandit Mythic ever, it'll feel less bad to purchase a heroic house of cards if you know, all right, down the line, if I kill this thing, I can upgrade it.
Yeah, it still doesn't feel great, but I mean, at least we got something.
There's like a lot of ways they could make this feel better, and I don't think they're probably not going to do any of them. But like, you're right, we did still win the battle of at least M plusers. Kind of, it's a lot better than it was before. With being able to buy a nice myth track trinket, there are a lot of specs that have really good ones as well, right? Like if you want a pacemaker, you know, it's huge. This is the first time you could deterministically buy M plus trinkets. Like I don't want to gloss over the fact that like that is a really nice thing that's going to exist this season. And if you look at top keys, it's no longer going to be a lottery of which people got these stupid things out of their vaults. Okay, class tuning. The Unholy DK nerf is a kind of a big one. They nerfed the Blood is Life by like half of the stored damage.
Yeah,
and then they buffed Ret and Og, which I think are the 2 pretty big buffs to Ret and Og.
It's funny how much they've buffed Og, and it's still probably not going to be played.
Yeah,
I just don't know what they're trying to do with Og. I mean, I'd be very curious to hear like what exactly they want to do with it, what direction they're going with Og.
My guess is that they just don't want it to be as awful as it currently is, but they also don't want it to be good or meta. And so they nerfed it so much, and now they're kind of like buffing it back up. But I said this when I made my like patch notes reading video. I think what they should do with it is you could just keep doing buffs to it. This is not actually as big of a buff as it looks as well, because it's 15% of their damage, but it doesn't buff Ebonmite or Breath of Eon's conversion factor, any of those things, which is still a lot of their damage, although less than it used to be by a lot. Probably they can just keep buffing it, and then whenever they buff it and people actually start using it in high-end content, then they should revert that last buff and leave it at the one just before that. That's my
that would
advice.
be the proper way of tuning. Yeah,
but I don't think they'll want to do that. I think obviously they would love to not have to do that last buff revert thing. So I think that's where they're at with Og, though, is they are sick of it being OP too, but they want to keep buffing it so that people who actually want to play Og in like lower level content don't feel quite as bad doing it. And I've seen people that are like Og mains in lower level content. This is anecdotal. I've only seen a couple comments like this, but I've seen them saying like, hey, the spec it's fun to play for us right now. Right. So like making it so that the social stigma of playing Og gets a little bit less bad than it is right now is definitely a good thing for those players.
I actually haven't seen a singular Og all season. Not a single one. Not in Raid, not in M+, nothing. It's actually crazy how extinct they've become.
Well, because it doesn't have like a player base built up, right? The only people that have played it over the past few years, it hasn't had time to build up like a 10-year-old Og main.
Yeah, but it's a pretty distinct class, so I feel like there are a lot of people who want that very specific playstyle of being a support, and it has been popular for, 2 years almost?
True. That's right. And I guess when it was good, there was an argument that like, well, it's going to have high representation because it's the only support class in the game. And so everybody who wants to play one of those is playing it. So I guess the fact that its popularity in the high end has dropped off that much does sort of disprove that side of it. It's like, okay, at least there's a level they can nerf it to where that stops being true. But was this the worst that a spec has ever been in WoW's history? Like start of this season Og Evoker? It's probably close.
Probably.
Maybe not WoW's history, but like modern history.
Yeah, it depends on what content too, because like I would say Shadow Priest is pretty terrible right now. It is crazy what has happened to Shadow Priest. I kind of feel bad because that class was like doing well in raid, and then Liquid played 2, 3 of them on certain fights. They got nerfed pretty hard, and they were already stinking real bad in M plus. Now that class is
Yeah,
like completely dead.
it reminds me of Fury Warrior last season, where like Fury was sick on the last few bosses of Mythic, and like okay, Shadow is sick on one boss on Mythic, which is One Arm Bandit, but it's like so good there. Like a Shadow Priest is 1.5 of a regular DPS on that fight. They're crazy sick at that exact profile, but like that means that the most recent balance change that happened to Shadow was a nerf, even though they suck outside of that context. And it feels bad. I don't know what the solution is to that besides like if Blizzard wants specs to have niches like that, they probably just have to be okay with them being that dominant at the fights that perfectly cater to that niche, uh, rather than nerfing it so that they are only good there and awful everywhere else.
Yeah, I will say though, Blizzard has definitely done a much better job at figuring out the exact problems with the specs. Like the whole DK nerf, they nerfed their Blood Beast damage and AoE, but they didn't touch them in raid. In fact, they buffed the class in single target raid. So it's really good to see those types of changes. In fact, I mean,
Yeah.
is this the first time we've seen a major class tuning patch this late into the patch?
Um,
This late into the season?
it's weird that it's not with the like they didn't do any tuning on the point X point 5 patch, which is weird.
That is
And
true.
now they're
Yeah.
doing like a like if you think about this as being the tuning that comes with the point X point 5 patch, it's like a pretty small balance change compared to previous point X point 5s, but maybe they're trying to detach the tuning from the patch cycle like that. I'm not sure. It is definitely later. There have been some patches in the game's history that they've abandoned before this point for sure. It's not that late into the season though. Still only what 2.5 months or something.
It has I swear my sense of time is like so warped whenever the tier ends early. I mean, did the tier even end early? I don't even know.
It's it for a lot of guilds because like even if you spend a lot of pulls on Bandit and Mugsy, it's like that still is it's just not that long compared to how long a lot of guilds spent like a month on Ansarek, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I'm actually curious how like guilds are doing right now because I was watching Drogo's guild progression the other day, and holy hell, it seems like such a struggle. We have like 200 something wipes, like 250 or something on Mugsy, and like 180 or something on One Armed Bandit. This is looking like a normal
Dude,
tier for your mythic rating guilds. It's you would have
it's
expected it to be
weird
a lot easier.
because yeah, like the narrative around this tier is it's an easy tier, but oh my god, the way that you prog these last few fights is so tough. Like you just have these kind of hopeless moments where it's like, man, people just there's some jobs that just have to get learned, or some mechanics that just have to get learned, and like I can I am powerless to help with this. I've even experienced this in my guild's alt run on One Arm Bandit, where like we took I think 50 pulls on our alts to kill One Arm Bandit.
50, dude, there's no way you're sticking around for 50 pulls.
Well, it was like over 3 weeks, so we didn't kill it
Okay.
1 week, came back, didn't kill it the next week, came back, progged it for another like 3 hours, and then killed it this week. And like, uh, man, that was like I could see how progging these fights in particular would be pretty damn demoralizing. It's tough out there. Bandit in particular, which I did experience on Prog as well with Bandit. So I've kind of progged Bandit twice now because we've also done it on our alts, and that
Yeah,
also
having a
is hard.
reprog is like literally the worst.
But it's weird because like usually things are pretty easy to kill on your alts if you did them on your mains. Like not right away. You're worse at your alts. They're worse geared. Especially there are some people in your raid are maybe like 95% as good as they are on their mains. Some people are 98%, but some people are like 70% as good as they are on their mains, and that can make reprog take quite a while. But yeah, both Bandit and Mugsy, and I think Gallywix is going to be the easiest of them to do on our alts, but it's tough. It's brutal. The way the fights are hard. It's hard for me to like explain exactly why, but I totally see it. I think this tier is going to have a reputation of being an easy tier for the race world first, but I don't think that reputation is at all going to hold for like mid tier cutting edge.
Yeah, they're pretty punishing fights. I think that's the biggest part. It's like something if it's a bit difficult. Well, I mean, this is also probably the least nerfed tier out of past like what? For a very long time now. I remember Shadowland bosses getting nerfed pretty heavily, Dragonflight bosses getting nerfed pretty heavily,
Yeah,
but these bosses
Avarice
didn't
didn't
really get
take
touched a whole lot. Yeah, I guess
Avarice
Avarice
didn't take
didn't get nerfed
some
as much.
big nerfs. I mean, every raid gets nerfed, even the easy raids, and like so Mugsy has taken 5% health nerf, and then there was that other earlier change, which wasn't a huge nerf to it. Bandit got like 10% real assistant nerf, and the coin line is longer. But yeah, there's
The
not like
mechanics are still the same though. It's not like
yeah,
they nerfed
exactly.
the
It's
major
still
fail
pretty
points.
punishing.
Yeah.
And also the thing about Bandit is pushing faster usually makes fights way easier. If you think about Mythic Fyrak, doing the entire last phase and dealing with 8 seeds out at once is like nuclear difficulty. Later on in that patch, even before they nerfed it, so there was half as many seeds or whatever. But if you could push it so you killed the boss when you had 6 seeds out instead of 8, or 5 seeds out instead of pretty rare, but like doing it with a couple seconds of 7 instead of all of the 7 and then a couple seconds of 8 was like exponentially easier. And if you think about Bandit, that's not true at all. Bandit, you can't, all the extra damage you do in phase 1 doesn't matter because the enrage check starts when you hit P2, and you can't even push and skip a hard overlap on the pylons because you have to spawn all 3 or else they spawn in the middle of the room and wipe you. So like if you try and kill it faster, you need to actually just change your strat entirely, and it doesn't make it really easier, it just makes it faster. So that's kind of true for Mugsy as well. Like Mugsy, you don't get to skip the hard part of the fight, right? You're skipping, the last 15 seconds of the fight maybe, which is just kiting around some mines and then dipping into the fire. But like that part's really easy. That part of Mugsy is so free. The only thing that more gear and more damage lets you do, besides now when you can now 4 heal it and whatever, but like for the first 2 months after that patch, it didn't really get like exponentially easier in the way that Fire Act does with extra gear, extra dam.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that's really nice though is the first bar bosses feel a lot more killable. We the friend raids that I've been doing have actually been clearing up to stix, which is
including
kind of
stix.
surprising. Including stix, yeah.
Ooh,
up to including
that's
stix.
impressive. Yeah, I've done maybe 10 pulls of stix in a semi pug or something, and we got it to like 50% and gave up. But it's cool that friend raid can kill that boss.
Yeah, we actually one shot it this week.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's how many of the people are like in guilds that kill stix or have killed stix?
Oh yeah, like a lot of them. I mean,
like everybody, because I was trying to pug it with like it was like 15 of us were cutting edge or something, and then 5 people were from the group finder, and not all of them had killed mythic stix. And if you have even like 3 pugs who haven't killed mythic stix, that fight feels like nuclear difficulty.
Yeah, that's generally how it is.
Possible.
It's like maybe like 5 idiot M plusers, and then the rest are like Hall of Fame raiders. Like some of them are like liquid players. So,
but even if they're idiot M plusers, they're like high key people, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
but they're usually the more clueless ones, like the ones that like literally are clueless.
Yeah, when you compare that difficulty to like Rashanan, doing Rashanan with a couple clueless people is like, oh, they're gonna scissor the raid a couple times, but that's it, right? That boss is definitely gonna die.
Yeah,
night and day compared to how hard Stix is.
I mean, especially with the turbo boost coming, like that's gonna make a big difference.
True.
You're gonna get so much more item level, and at that point, we're probably gonna be like what 12% damage buff or something like that.
Yeah, 12% comes out in 2, like not next reset. Did we get 9% this week?
I think it was this week. Yep.
Yeah, so it'll be in like 2 more resets after. So still a little ways before the 12%, but it'll be right around when like the week after the turbo boost, I think, when we get the 12%er.
Okay, yeah.
Dude, speaking of the turbo boost, they showed on PTR now it does cost you crests to upgrade your crafted pieces, which I think makes sense, is to be expected. Like if you want to take your craft pieces up, that costs crests. Although I'm pretty annoyed that I'm gonna have to do so much recrafting on all my guys to get the turbo boost eye level. That's gonna be a little annoying. It's only gonna be annoying for a day, I guess, but I'm gonna do like 30 recraft orders in one day when this stupid thing comes out.
It's so expensive too. I haven't checked the price recently of materials, but for the first month or 2 of the patch, the materials were so expensive.
Yeah, you want to use the sanctified alloys or the delve materials or whatever, and it's just like, ooh, maybe I could just live without 6 eye levels here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I might do that on some of my alts actually. Yeah, whatever. I got enough gold. I'll probably spend it, but the map price is definitely pretty high. All right, it's time for our Patreon question. Well, we sort of stealth recorded this, little look behind the scenes. We just decided to do it right now. So Frank has just provided us with our Patreon question this week. This one comes from IDK Brodo Baggins. So a good name the person came up with on the fly, I guess. They say, "Hello, PoddyC team. I need your advice. I raid semi-competitively, 2 nights a week, 4 hours each, top 150. 2 nights a week, 4 hours each. So 8-hour guild that's top 150. Not a lot of
That's
those.
pretty good.
That's very high. If you
Well,
mean
hold
top
on.
50
Is that top
US,
150? Yeah, US or world? Because top 150 world or US, that could be like what? Top 1,000 world?
that's still good. Like there's still not a lot of guilds that do that on those hours, but that could be world 150 or US 150, world 3000 or something, as the
Yeah,
old
something
meme
like
used to
that.
go. But yeah, if it's world, like there's only a couple of guilds that are that good, um, and they're really sick. Like those guilds are crazy. But yeah, so late night prog is all I can manage. Whenever I find a guild that raids at times I can make, it's packed with Hall of Fame and top 50 players running alts. Great at the game. A few of them are total egotistical parse assholes.
No, that's not
Specifically in
true. Wait, first of all, that part's not true. I
yeah,
feel
so
like
this
top
person's in like a late
50.
night guild with alts from top guilds, basically, is what they're saying.
Yeah, like maybe like those specific guilds.
Hmm.
But I swear there are like so many top 50 guilds that they like might run alts, but they are absolutely terrible at the game, and they're not all parse assholes. Like I don't know, there seems to be like this idea that if you're in a top 50 world guild, you have no life, you don't work a job, you raid for like 20 hours a week minimum. That's like Pop Tart corn dogs, but
That's
it's
me,
like
yeah.
yeah, but like a lot of
We
guilds
got a
are
lot of
not like
wages in the
this at
guild,
all.
but not me.
But not me. Exactly, same.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like that's a but maybe there's a few people like that this person's encountered and they're extrapolating.
Okay, yeah, sure, yeah.
So specifically in the guild I trialed and passed, now 5% on Mugsy. Okay, that tells us it's top
Oh,
150
okay, yeah, yeah.
US.
So
So
yeah, we're talking about this specific guild. I see.
mystery solved. Uh, this one dude shouts things like, "Do you even have fucking eyes? What the fuck are you doing? Just play the game. It's not hard, idiot. Or you fucking have wasted 20 to 50 pulls doing this shit. Why are you even here? You do this mistake every time." This dude even mutes his own voice on Twitch stream, so you can't clip the tirades. The GM and officers keep him around because he and 3 to 4 other raiders come from top 50 guilds and help us prog their alts, but the toxicity is brutal. There are only 1 or 2 guilds that raid late enough for me. Should I start my own guild instead? How do I recruit and build a raiding team from scratch? What would you do?
I see. Okay.
Do you know this guild? Do you know which
You
guild this is?
know,
Or okay, I don't
this is
either.
sounding. I mean, this is sounding like a lot of guilds, but it's probably not one of those specific guilds. So it just means that there
Yeah,
are a lot of guilds like this.
I think the struggle of like you have a couple of like jerks that you want to kick out of your guild, but they're really good, or even not necessarily they're really good, but like they're friends with a lot of your good players. Like that's a really tough spot for GMs and officers to deal with, right? Of like, you know, we can't kick this guy because we're gonna lose like a bunch of ranks because we're gonna lose a bunch of good players that are better than our guild, right? But I
Yeah,
would
that's
say if you are
rough.
one of the officers in those guilds, you got to just kick those people, like, or tell them, hey, you can't talk to our people that way. Um, that would make things a lot better. But obviously, the person sending in this question is like not in leadership, so they can't do that.
Yeah, I mean, I know Max would say for sure to just like get rid of these people because if you're just gonna cause this guild to blow up, I mean, this is 100% gonna be something that would appear in a potty T.
That's right.
But at the same time, I don't know. This feels like a ticking time bomb. Like it's probably fucked either way. I'm gonna be completely honest. I feel like on one hand, if you kick them, then well, I mean, you've lost a lot of good players in your guild, and your guild is probably fucked. And the people who showed up to begin with probably aren't too interested in sticking around or continuing. And at the same time, if you keep these people in the guild, it's only a matter of time before the guild dissolves.
Yeah. So it's a tough spot for leadership to be in. The person sending in this question, it sounds like they're just a raider in this guild. And it's one of those
Yeah.
guilds where it's like, okay, you're a pretty good player. You're somewhat committed. You're playing with some people that are much better than that and more committed. Maybe not even better, but just, they have more fight knowledge because they progged it already in their 20-hour main guilds. And now they're here on their alts. And like, that experience can definitely kind of suck. It can suck for all parties. I was complaining about wiping 50 times on alts on Bandit, right? And like that felt almost worse than wiping 150 times on mains on that boss because like I've already done it. And the people that are playing alts in this kind of guild are feeling that as well, but they're even less emotionally mature than me. And so they're taking it out on their other people that they're raiding with who also aren't even, all other alts, right? They're people that are just at that level learning it for the first time. So it's a kind of natural thing for those people to get frustrated with. And it's one of the reasons why I think you got to be really careful anytime you're in a situation where there are people that aren't genuinely progging it with you, right? Like they're reprogging it, they're playing for fun on some alt or something like that. Like that's a bit of a recipe for this kind of disaster. So yeah, I would say you should hop guilds. Starting your own guild instead, I mean, that's a lot of responsibility. It's that would be a big step to take.
Yeah, do not do that unless you're like willing to put a lot into this, especially if, like, bro, our guy here says around a full-time job and 3 kids. There's no shot you'll be able to start your own guild. That seems like a recipe for disaster.
You could have 16 more kids. That would be one pathway to doing it. Otherwise, I think, your best bet is going to be, like, when you think about a guild master, almost always guild masters are, relative to their guild, like they not even play more often, but like they're more time committed to doing all the GM stuff and like being around, being there every week, handling all this stuff with recruitment and drama and all these things outside of raids. So the time commitments involved, like if you're raiding in an 8-hour guild, that's one thing. But if you want to be the GM of an 8-hour guild, like that's probably a similar commitment to raiding in maybe a 16-hour guild, something like that. Like it's a lot more that you'd be shouldering. So my advice would be to don't do that. And instead, you said there's not a lot of guilds that raid your hours, but like find one of them and join one of those instead, because making your own guild that seems like it would cause some of the problems that you can't solve because of your schedule.
Yeah, maybe don't leave just yet, but like maybe start exploring your options.
Yeah, you might be put in this awkward spot. No, I don't think that's toxic at all. Like, don't leave your job until you got a new one lined up. That's a pretty common...
Yeah, but I know a lot of people, like, guilds are like super against that, where if you're just sneakily applying to guilds while you're actively in a guild, they fucking hate that.
Yeah, I mean, if they find out, there's a lot of guilds that will kick you, but I don't think it's unethical to do it. I think those guilds are just being kind of unreasonable. The one thing that is bad is like if you leave mid prog on a boss during a tier to a lesser extent, but if you're in a lower ranked guild, you kind of have to leave in the middle of a tier because your guild's always progging. But as you get up higher, leaving it all during a tier is kind of BM, and leaving mid boss prog is bad. But other than that, I don't think there's anything wrong with shopping around and finding a new guild. And you might not find one. Like if you're raiding weird enough hours, if you want to raid 2 nights, 4 hours, late night, there might only be this guild or a couple others. And if those don't work out for you, like you might have to decide between, do I want to raid with these jerks or not raid at all? Or
you might have to become an NM pluser. That's like the worst case.
Yeah, scenario. Or even more casual, right? Join a 2-night, 6-hour guild, something like that, which 3-hour guild, right? 3 hours per night, so 6 hours total. But I would say, yeah, you might have to make that decision. This guild might be the only option to raid the hours and the hardcoreness that you want, and you have to decide if that's worth the abuse, which I would say long term it probably isn't, but I can't make that call for you. And then, worst case, you could become an M pluser.
Well, yeah, imagine how bad that would be if you had to become an M pluser.
Yeah.
You would be stuck being a second-class citizen, and you'd just be stuck without Dinars. No, but like this is exactly why a lot of people quit Mythic raiding. Like there are a lot of people out there who love M plus, or not love M plus, love Mythic raiding, but they can't exactly do that, so they just end up doing M plus instead.
Right.
Or they go for like a more casual guild. But sometimes you won't find that exact same fulfillment that you normally get. Because it for sure feels really bad going down in guilds. I know so many people like this. I know people who either used to be in Liquid or used to be in like some extremely good guild, and if they just can't go down in guilds anymore. It just feels terrible to be trying to raid and prog with these lower level guilds.
Yeah, it's not the same, right? Like once you have done it for real, whatever that means to you, doing it less hardcore. It's even just like playing with people that are slower to learn and are less committed than you. Like that can be a frustrating experience. If that is you, the correct way to deal with that is to just not raid in that environment rather than abuse the people you're playing with, which is what it sounds like. It's unluckily our question sender inner is playing with some people that are feeling that way and are taking it out on the other raiders who haven't done anything wrong.
Yeah, my personal advice: just finish prog, get some good logs, and try looking for guilds. I would not recommend trying to create your own guild. I mean, if you really want to, then sure, have fun, good luck. But it
Yeah.
is gonna be a tall order.
Now, on the side of advice for recruiting and building a raid team from scratch, that's a big question. That's actually a topic we're looking at doing some point in the near future when Max is back, maybe. So look forward. Stay tuned to the PoddyC if you want that. Speaking of episodes we might do in the future, I was also thinking about maybe doing a tank episode, a tank questions, like a tank clinic episode, which would be like, basically advice for new to medium experienced tanks that we could give and answering questions that those sorts of players have. Now, I'm not sure if this will be a good episode or if it'd be too niche or anything like that. So if you're listening right now, let us know if you think that would be a good episode. And also if you have any questions for that episode. And you may or may not see that at some point in the future, depending on whether we decide to do it or not. But that's an idea that
we are all tank players. This
exactly,
is the all tank podcast.
Exactly. We want to leverage that for good. And then of course, I know that all the healers and stuff, we'll get some more healer episodes on soon as well. Don't worry.
No, not the healers.
True. Okay. Last thing I want to cover before we end our show for the week is, and we saved this for last so that if you want to click off, you can. What do you think of the MDI this weekend? There was the spec variety rule coming in, which I think had some predictable effects. I think it creates a sort of weird thing where like the best teams play around it more, and then the weaker teams ignore it and say we'll deal with the bans on Sunday if we get to it, and then that might lead to like maybe more competitive day ones but less competitive Sundays. But what was your like watching the MDI? How's and also prepping for your own weekend? How's that?
Yeah,
been?
so we've been practicing during the cups because that's like our limited window of being able to practice. We can't practice after the day of the cups, so we just like try to squeeze in whatever practice we can. And while we were watching, like Corey brought up Drogo being third and their team possibly getting eliminated, and I got so interested all of a sudden. I was watching that hard. I was like, holy shit, it would be so funny right now if Drogo wiped here and they just lost, because they would have been what, the sixth or seventh team or seventh seed team,
and they were losing to the 19th seed. The 19th seed was first out of that day as well. And yeah, it's because they went for the strategy of like playing off meta stuff so that they could play the meta on Sunday. But like they almost didn't make it to Sunday because they almost lost to two teams that didn't do that and just played, pretty much full meta all day.
They basically self-sabotaged so that they could make it to Sunday, right? And
right. But now the Sunday, we're recording this on the Saturday after the MDI, so I don't know how Sunday's going to go, but there's two teams that have access to the meta comp and two teams that are losing either 2 or 3 specs from it, which that's going to be, I don't know for sure, but I suspect that Sunday is going to be, that like Drogo's team maybe had a hard time making it to Sunday, but they'll have a pretty easy time making it through Sunday.
Yeah, I feel like this format doesn't work as much if some of the teams weren't playing to win, because I mean, like, these teams aren't really playing to win, right? Like, they're just playing to make it to Sunday,
right?
But at the same time, it does create a pretty interesting dynamic of the good team having to potentially sacrifice their picks, or like potentially not making it to Sunday just so that they could keep their picks.
Yeah, it's actually been pretty fun to watch. My guess is that they'll try a different format next season, but I don't know for sure. The one thing I always say this, but like I'm always a fan of trying out new stuff that might work and seeing if it does, rather than like theorizing that it won't work and just never trying anything new. So I think especially with like changing specs in the MDI, especially because there's no affixes anymore in 12 plus keys. So like if you don't have some kind of rule to encourage some kind of variety and you're trying to do it for 4 weekends, I'd be very worried about things getting very boring by the end. But I think actually with a rule like this, there's going to be something exciting on most of the days of the groups where it's in play, and then on the actual global finals it's not there and it's just full battle cruiser World of Warcraft all 3 days. So yeah, I would say I am cautiously optimistic that it's going to be a pretty fun MDI season to watch because of the rule, or the rule's going to help with that. But also I would probably put some money on it changing before for the next season in some way or other.
I also think this goes to show that there are specs that are much better than people initially thought. Because I mean, usually whenever you're playing these types of comps, the public perception is, okay, these are the only good specs. Every other spec in the game is complete trash. But I mean, this weekend kind of goes to show, like, some of these specs are actually kind of insane. Like, the Destro locks are doing pretty much Unholy DK damage. In fact, I don't even know how good Unholy DK is going to be after this massive...
Right, next weekend we might not see it.
Yeah, dude, that's some crazy changes in the middle of MDI.
Yeah. It's hard to be super confident how big the Unholy nerf is, because, like, the Unholy nerf nerfs your high roll pulls, which you already needed to be able to do all the pulls if your Unholy DK doesn't high roll. But I wouldn't be surprised if you don't play it. And yeah, I like how every team kind of has a different thing that they did when they played off meta stuff, right? And a lot of it was
they're kind
like,
of playing their mains.
Yeah, people playing their mains, which I think has always been, if we could have an MDI where it was just, hey, you're playing your mains, and we could somehow have a rule that did that, like, that would be so fun to watch. You just have Shelly awesome. On walk in every dungeon, right? And like you're playing Bear back in BFA, right? And like that would be
everyone just sick. Brings out their big guns. You've got like Drogo on his prop alley, and
we saw that.
Shelly on
his
Warlock, Casual on his Rogue.
Mm-hmm. So I really like getting the chance to see a little bit more of it. Although it is kind of, again, I'm not sure that this rule is the perfect rule, but that has been a very nice side of it, at least.
I mean, personally, I feel like I kind of want them to take it a step further and just, you can only play one class per, or you can only play the same spec.
Like, you can use
per dungeon.
Each spec one day. You can't use it on multiple days.
No, like per dungeon even. So if you're playing like this specific comp in Workshop, you can only play that comp, or you can only play those specs in Workshop. So you have to like change
the problem with that
is
that like that's like giga multi-classing pressure, right? Where like you would have
that
to
would
learn
be
so many specs on people playing this tournament. But that would be cool, yeah. Even just like changing the spec variety rules so that it looks at dungeons rather than like total runs or something like that, and it's like, you don't, because right now you kind of do this thing where you play like 5 dungeons at the start of the day, the lower keys on your plan B comp, and then you swap to the plan A comp for the high keys at the end of the day, and like making that based on the dungeon rather than the total number of runs or something like that would maybe go with that. But I don't know. I mean, I'm just bouncing around ideas, but I'm glad that Blizzard also was bouncing around ideas and decided to try some of them this season. I think the season's a lot more exciting than if they just did, nothing.
Yeah, agreed. What was the chat?
What do you think about no affixes, by the way, in TGP MDI?
On one hand, it's really nice. Mm-hmm. Actually, I would say I definitely like it more in MDI, or not MDI, but I guess MDI
like low keys.
Yeah, same thing. I like it way more now because it makes practice much more simple. I feel like we haven't had to practice nearly as much as we normally do. We've only been practicing for like a week and a half, or like maybe 2 weeks now. I don't even know how long it's been. We haven't been practicing that much, but it feels like we're largely complete. Whereas normally at this point, it's like, okay, maybe we've got done with the fortified dungeons, or maybe we've got done with both fortified and tyrannical, but we don't know what it's gonna be like on sanguine. So
yeah,
kind of nice.
Dude, you have to do sanguine dungeons. You have to do bolstering dungeons. Like there were some dungeons where explosive was way harder as well. Yeah.
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 I
The
still
practice
feel like
time thing
for
is
live
nice.
keys though, I'm not entirely sure on the live key part because as nice that is as nice that is it is to like have every week be a push week. It also feels kind of bad right now. I'm not gonna lie.
Like the
Maybe
fact
people
that
are
it's
gonna
not
be
different from week to week.
yeah. Maybe people are gonna be pissed about this because I know a lot of people are like super against this idea. But I feel like resilient keys and no affixes have been kind of bad. Bro, I'm gonna piss off a lot of people saying that. I swear, because
Uh,
people,
this is a safe space. Yeah.
yeah,
It's
because
good.
I mean, like, there's been so many times where it's like, all right, is resilient a mistake? Because it definitely like devalues keys a lot, and you get to the point where you're just it feels almost like you're doing raid progression. Like some nights we're just sitting in a resilient key, or like people just don't take it as serious because it's resilient. It certainly feels bad, but I know like for a lot of people they really like resilient and they really like having no affixes.
Yeah. I remember we've had a lot of discussions over the years about like what if they just remove depletion, and resilient keys is like kind of close to that, except it doesn't work on the prog keys, obviously. But like
Yeah, it's halfway there.
it's halfway there, and I definitely am glad that it's not on the prog keys at least. And I do kind of think like, yeah, maybe they should change resilient keys to not like be as strong as they are. Like, what if it was a instead of depleting it you could wipe, or you could do 3 times and then it depleted, right? Like it depleted after the third
Or
attempt
at
at
least
the
make it
key,
so
which
that
didn't
like you
work.
can't just run back into the dungeon after like the first pull. Because like at the very you should at least
Right,
do a good amount of the keys. Because like right now what happens is all right, the first pull goes kind of poorly. People just zone out and be just like doing it again, and
right.
it just
That's
feels like
always been
raid
my big worry
progression.
about doing this, like keys not depleting. Yeah.
Yeah. That's like one of the most common questions being asked right now in M plus. Whenever a key is like half depleted, someone will type in chat is Resil question mark.
Yeah, that literally happened to me in a just a 12. Like I was doing an alt 12 for funsies, and the tank just like pulled some peacekeepers at the start of Motherload, and then was like, "Oh, is it resilient? Okay, goodbye." I was like, "All right, well, my life has only been made worse by resilient keys so far." Then, but I haven't actually pushed yet this season. I'm not sure if I will. I've been doing a lot of like alt low keys. I've done a couple like 13s and 14s on my mage for fun, but nothing, no real push yet.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I will say the one nice thing about resilience is it does let people play with their friends without the worry of the key
That is
depleting.
nice. It's definitely got upsides. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm also torn on it, and also on affixes. Like I like weeks being different from each other, but I also am very glad that there's not like dead weeks anymore, where
And
like
when we're
or bolstering
bolstering.
weeks and stuff anymore. Like that's such the absence of that is very nice. It reminds me sort of when they took away seasonal affixes, where I'm like, okay, a lot of really bad stuff is now gone, but also some good stuff, and like more than the good stuff, but like the potential for new good stuff in any given season has also gone.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I was gonna ask about the MDI chat, by the way. Was anyone still complaining in MDI chat?
Oh, I'm sure there were. I don't really read chat while I'm casting because I get distracted if I do. So I'm not 100% sure, but um, I imagine, especially because like a goal of the spec variety rule is for there to be variety. When the at the end of the day, all the teams are on the meta comp again, and I imagine that then there's people complaining about that. But I don't know. The goal isn't to remove people complaining, right? It's like that's part of it, but it's also just to make it more fun to watch, which I think it definitely does.
Yeah, I mean, I've enjoyed watching it so far. It's been a
Mm-hmm.
good first weekend.
Yeah, we'll see if how good it stays into the weeks 2 and 3 as well, the second and third cups, because those are, I think, especially without affixes, those ones are hard to have be as interesting as the first one. But if the teams like are doing different stuff with the off meta specs that they're playing, that could go a long way. So yeah, again, I'm optimistic. I've liked casting the weird specs. It helps as well because like I feel good about it because I know a lot of I know all the weird interactions that a lot of the specs have and like how a lot of them work. So I feel like I got a competitive advantage as a caster whenever more specs are being played.
That is true.
All right. I think we're out of stuff to talk about for this week. No Max here to, double the length of the podcast. So that's going to be it for us for now, unless there's anything else that you wanted to bring up, anything we didn't mention.
No, yeah, that's all. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, we'll see you all next week. Adios.
Adios.